Curtis on his time, breaking down the stories every view will unwind. From left to right we'll see the light. It's balance, we're chasing, no fighters fight. Curtis still be talking straight. Let's hear both sides, let's communicate. Politics and reason, let's find the truth. Curtis Selby's here to bridge it for you. Debates, insights, it's all on the screen. Curtis Selby, keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis Selby. The combos you need. The combos you need. Insights, it's all on the screen. Curtis Selby, keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis Selby. The convo's unique. Curtis Selby, talking it straight. Let's hear both sides, let's communicate. Politics and reason, let's find the truth. Curtis Selby's here to bridge it for you. Debates, insights, it's all on the screen. Curtis Selby, keeping it keen. Hit subscribe, stay a while, let's dive in deep with Curtis Selby. The combos you need. The combos you need. The combos you need.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is I, Curtis Selby, your retired midnight blogger with blogs in this case at 2:04 p.m. This is another episode of The Voice of Northern Oklahoma, April 6th of 2025. Unlike the previous episodes, I actually have a topic. This topic was inspired by the Jake Merrick podcast, so likely if you want more and frankly probably better information, I will refer you to that podcast. But since you're here, I will do the best I can to discuss with you the topic. Oklahoma is the reddest state there is. We brag about it, everybody talks about it, it is demonstrable in the way that we vote. And yet, it feels like we have really high taxes here. And I think we all believe that one of the strongest core elements of being quote-unquote red is that we believe in low taxes. Well, let me say hello to everyone in the chat, and then I will get on with the topic. To quote Monty Python, get on with it! Charlotte Nightstar the Werewolf, hello! Ow! She's doing an interview today, wishing us a great stream, wishing me all the luck in the world and the universe. Love and peace, courtesy folks who watch. Please check out Charlotte Nightstar the Werewolf. She's an up-and-comer who will go far. I linked the Merrick podcast on both streams. I'm streaming on both YouTube and Rumble. Absolutely appreciate you, whichever one of these medium you choose to listen to me on. And John Potterero is listening on Rumble. Thank you very much. He's probably watching on both media, actually. Thank you very much. You're a gentleman and a scholar. He says when he rewatched last night's stream here, the beginning was just my voice and the big green triangle, but only for a short time. It seemed like when I shared my screen, it was okay. But thank you for letting me know, because frankly, I can't seem to see a thing on my end. I clicked a button. Let me know if that does anything. I don't know. It looks like I've got 7 people on Rumble, so God bless all of you. Let me know what's going on over there. I don't know why StreamYard doesn't seem to be very user-friendly with the green machine. But for personal reasons, I want to use the green machine, as well as YouTube. I want to expand into more mediums so more people can hear. John Ponderera says 5x5 over here. Well, God bless. I hope it stays that way, because on my end, it's just like a big spinning ball surrounding my ugly mug. But at any rate, we're learning apace. So if I can be smart enough not to hit end screen, and instead just end the music, I will begin talking about my topic. So, as I discussed, Oklahoma is one of the reddest of the red. And indeed, I will look up the information to prove that. Reddest state in the union. I type that in, and what do I get? Oh, I get Wyoming. Wow. Okay. Well, I guess the internet doesn't like us. According to World Population Review, we are the 4th reddest state. We're slipping, guys. We're slipping. I have no idea what their definition, though, is. These are the states within that state that primarily vote for the Republican Party. The term is also used, blah, 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 blah. Wow, there's a lot of different information out here. But let's at least look up how red does Oklahoma vote. This is the difference between me and Jake Merrick. You won't get rattling typing on his show. All right, let's take a look here. I'll share this, and we shall see how Oklahoma stacks up. We have a whopping 7 electoral votes. We gained statehood in 1907. We voted Democratic in all but 2 elections through 1948, but has not gone Democratic since, except in the landslide win for Lyndon Johnson in 1964. Already fairly populous when admitted to the Union, the state had 7 electoral votes in the 1908 election. No state outside the original 13 colonies except Maine started with more. In 1924, Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris by 656 electoral votes or I don't know what that means. 656% to 32%, that makes no sense. I don't know what they mean by that. But it was the 6th consecutive election that the Republicans had won by over 30%. That has to be a typo. It must have been like 65.6% or something. Anyway, here we are. Here we are on the last, the presidential elections going back to 2000. You see red. Where's Lyndon Johnson? Well, just red. It looks like Nixon actually took 73.7% of the vote. So sorry, Donald Trump, you don't match Richard Nixon. I'm sure we were all proud to vote for Nixon. And I guess it doesn't go back any further. Well, at any rate, here we go. This shows a graph of the Electoral College votes. It looks like 1960, we voted for Nixon. 1956 for Eisenhower. 1952 for Eisenhower. Here's Johnson, the last president that Oklahoma voted for. And on the Democrat ticket, Truman, Roosevelt, Herbert Hoover. We'd vote for Herbert Hoover again. Davis, who lost to, who did he lose to? I can't remember now. Harding, we voted for Harding. Wilson, and Bryan, who, if memory serves, lost to Taft. But I can't remember who the president was this year. I feel like a moron. Anyway, 1920. I can get it all the way back to Hoover. I can't remember who won that year. I should, but I don't. Calvin Coolidge, maybe. I don't know. Keep cool with Coolidge. Hail and well met. The counting sheep. Howdy, howdy. I'm talking about how I live in one of the reddest states in the Union, and yet it at least seems as though our taxes are really high considering that we are so red. So let's take a look at tax rates in Oklahoma versus Texas. We want to compare apples to oranges, or apples to apples. Later we'll compare apples to oranges, but we have two fairly red states here. Let's hope that this site is useful. Oklahoma tax rates. Nah, this doesn't look useful. Hardly at all. Visit the Oklahoma and Texas income tax pages. Wow, that's really useful. Not. Oh, I guess I could do it this way then. Okay, so choose a state. We choose the state of Texas. It's like a whole nother country. I'll never forget when my mother said that Mexico is like a whole nother country. Never forget that. All right, Texas. Let's compare. Well, that's really not a very useful site. Okay, I'm glad I didn't share that just yet. Let's go to this nolo.com. And here we can compare basically all of the states and see how we compare with everybody. So here we go. Looking at the A's, F's, A's, D's, F's, G's, H's, and some of the I's, it looks as though Connecticut has one of the higher rates at 12.8%. And they rank everybody. Cool beans. Where does Oklahoma? We rank 46th. So at 8.2%, we're actually quite low. So maybe that feeling is just us being silly. 8.2% as opposed to Ohio at 10.3%. Texas is lower at 8%. Let's see who else. Who else is lower? Wyoming, which the one website said was the reddest of the red. They have the second lowest in the Union. Who has lower? Wyoming, Texas, there can't be but one more state lower than us if we're ranked 46th. Who is 50th? Alaska. Alaska wins with 5.8%. But it just feels as though, it just seems as though taxes are inveterately high. I mean, on one hand, we have the income tax, but we also have the sales tax. And I know lots of people have proposed that we do one or the other as opposed to doing them both. And hello, Gorillas, Censor Thoughts. No, I'm sorry about that. I know I've been doing a terrible job of planning my streams, but no need to apologize. I'm just like kind of in my own little happy place anymore. Seems like this is the only stream I am capable of making a a concerted effort on getting on time. I should have set this up last night, but in my typical fashion, I procrastinated till now, partly because I didn't know if I wanted to do this topic until this morning. I thought about maybe just doing the typical thing where I share news of northern Oklahoma, but I listened to the Jake Merrick podcast, and it just inspired me to want to share why it might feel as though we have high taxes here, even though we're an extremely red state. We do not have very high taxes when compared to the rest of the union. We rank 46th, according to nolo.com, which may or may not be a very reliable site, but it was one of the more useful ones that popped up on the first page of not Google, but DuckDuckGo. Here we have apples versus oranges, New York versus Oklahoma, income tax comparison, the thresholds and the tax rates. So we in Oklahoma start taxing you, and this might also be why it feels like it's so high. We start taxing you on your first $1,000. You can make about $500 in a year, and we don't care to tax it. But once you hit $1,000, by gosh, that money is ours. And that might be one of the reasons why we feel that way, because the average rate may not be much, but we start taxing you at a lot lower poverty rate, a lot lower. I mean, $1,000, I bet most teenagers make at least that, whereas New York starts at $8,500. So you can make 8.5 times as much in New York before they start taxing you. Now it does basically they do tax you at a lot higher rate once you hit their threshold. They start at 4%. We start at 0.25%. So basically, we are taxing you when you're much poorer, but we're taxing you a lot less for being poor, in theory. Here again, this is apples to oranges. It's not a great comparison, but New York counts you as poor all the way up to 20. No, I guess their top bracket is $25,001,001, and so their top tax rate is 10.9%. Whereas Oklahoma's top rate, according to this is moverdb.com. I think the mystery is solved why we feel like we tax at such a high rate. Because even though we don't tax at that same 10.9 rate, our highest income bracket, according to this, and I can't believe this is right, this is surely wrong, is showing $7,201. So I guess according to Oklahoma State Legislature, a $7,201 a year person is equivalent to a New Yorker making $25 million. I think we've solved the mystery. Because let's face it, $7,201 a year in today's money is pretty freaking poor. The median income was actually a lot closer than I thought it would be. New York is 75,910, which would put you in a bracket of 5.85%. Whereas in Oklahoma, the median income is 63,440, which would put you at an income bracket of 4.75%. I'm guessing that the legislature wants to have a flat tax, but can't quite bring themselves to do it. I don't know. This is just a crazy, to me, this makes no sense. Why would you have these brackets? And why are there no brackets above 7,201? Yeah, I don't know. The taxes paid in the median income household in New York is $13,227 as opposed to Oklahoma's $9,200. So there's that. And income after tax based on median household income. New Yorker has $62,683 left after paying his state income taxes. The Oklahoman has $54,240 left after his state income taxes. So I think we have the reason why it feels like we pay such high taxes when you just look at the data, we don't. It's because you're still paying it, even if you're amongst the very dirt poor, poorest of the poor. This also kind of explains a lot about my youth, because I remember often I didn't have to pay federal income taxes, but almost always I had to pay Oklahoma state income taxes. Now I understand why. All right. The chat is rocking here. Let me get caught up in the chat. All right, Gorillas. At least I'll have something to listen to tomorrow. Yeah, and I hope you like it. I hope it's good. It wasn't nearly as well prepared as I would have liked it to be, but then I kind of pieced it together after work. Work wasn't as crazy as usual, but still, I was just exhausted yesterday and today. Hail, Suzanne, one of our favorite Canadians. I love that Star Trek uniform, and you are always welcome here. I hope you are doing well. Stream Elements is still doing its thing. I really need to work on that one of these days. If nothing else, I need to get Gorillas promoted on there. Gorillas, if you think your taxes are high, come to Minnesota. You know what? Let's look up Minnesota before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Minnesota. Actually, let's go back to the state tax comparisons. You guys have high taxes because you have the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. I kind of despise Google. I guess I am using Google, I guess. I thought I was using DuckDuckGo. All right. A comparison of state tax rates. We shall get back to sharing the screen. Here we go. Let's see where Minnesota, Oklahoma ranks 46th, which again confused me because I've always felt like we had high taxes here. And now I think I understand why. It's good to be rich in Oklahoma. It sucks to be poor. Minnesota. Ooh, your state ranks 5th. 12.1%. Ouch. And thank you very much. Yes, please, everybody, please drop links and share content creators out because, that's spiffy and cool. God bless you, Suzanne. And hail and well met, Connie Cleary, Bird Woman of YouTube. Check out her second channel, Fluff Chick Productions. She just got home, and you never need to apologize to me for being late because I know you are a busy person. You should be impressed. I didn't call you a busy beaver for reasons. Okay, people checking out other people's stuff. This is wonderful. And Suzanne, oh, I must be high. I'm not, but it's not a Star Trek uniform. It's just a yellow t-shirt. Sorry, for some reason I thought, I don't know. I have Star Trek on the brain. What do I know? So Minnesota and New York are right out. But if you're rich, and I think Oklahoma should promote this, come to Oklahoma. We won't hardly tax you at all. But then we wonder why our students go to other states. Anyway, um, Suzanne wishes. Yes, I understand. I'm still in my little dispute with Google, or I would share what you said, but that's funny. Gorilla Sensor Thoughts. Minnesota isn't even nice enough to use. Ooh, wow. Ooh, all right. Ooh. They won't even go. Yes, yes. Minnesota doesn't pay for dinner before that. Yes. And hello, Jim's Landscape LLC, Commodore Productions, another wonderful creator. We got creators coming in here, checking out Oklahoma tax rates. Hey, if you hit it big, Jim's, come to Oklahoma. We have really low taxes if you're rich. Gorilla Sensor Thoughts. It was First Contact Day yesterday. Ooh. And here I'm talking about boring taxes. I wanted to share another reason why I think that Oklahoma at least feels like it has high taxes. See, even though we're the reddest, or one of the reddest of the red, we have not always been so. We actually had a very strong Socialist Party influence in our early history. We had a next door neighbor back on the farm who was a socialist. He always got into arguments with Dad because he would argue that so and so down the road has a section of land and I only have a quarter of a section of land. He should share that with me. And Dad would say, well, you have a quarter section of land and all I have is 20 acres. You should share with me. For some reason, it didn't work that way. At any rate, that's anecdotal. Let's go to the history of Oklahoma's Socialist Party. This is the Oklahoma Historical Society. In the first 2 decades of the 20th century, the Socialist Party of Oklahoma consistently ranked as one of the top 3 state socialist organizations in America. At the party's height in the elections of 1914, the Socialist Party candidate for governor, Fred W. Holt, received more than 20% of the vote statewide. In Marshall and Rogers Mills counties, where the Socialist Party was strongest, Holt captured 41 and 35% of the vote, respectively. More than 175 socialists were elected to local and county offices that year, including 6 to the state legislature. As these statistics make clear, to a greater extent than anywhere else in the nation, the Socialist Party in Oklahoma played an active, potent role in state and local politics. The earliest formations of the Oklahoma Socialist Party occurred during the territorial period in Grant and Kay counties. Hey, my neck of the woods, near the Kansas border. By 1902, there were some 23 local affiliates with the socialist organization in Oklahoma Territory. Soon, the center of socialist activism shifted southward to the Indian Territory, and by 1907, the geographic shape of the Socialist Party of Oklahoma had become clear. Socialists were concentrated in the old Indian Territory, which I know most of you probably don't know the geography of Oklahoma, but essentially you're talking mainly, if I remember right, you're talking mainly western. Marshall, Johnson, Pontotoc, Seminole, Jefferson, Stevens, Garvin, Love, and McCurtain counties. And in Roger Mills, Beckham, Dewey, and Kiowa counties in the west. So I have it backward. Anyway, that's right, because Tahlequah is still the capital of the Cherokee tribe. So I always got my directions mixed up. From the outset, Oklahoma socialism had a decidedly agrarian focus, which is one of the ways where it differed quite a bit from most socialist parties. Most socialist parties mainly focused on the factory worker, Oklahoma's Socialist Party focused on the farmer. Building on the expertise its members inherited from past agrarian movements, principally the Farmers Alliance and the Farmers Union, Oklahoma Socialists directly challenged the inequities of the early 20th century commercial agriculture. Unlike their counterparts in the National Socialist Party, who thought of farmers as members of the petit bourgeois and therefore ineligible for party membership, Oklahoma Socialists argued forcibly that farmers who worked the land were legitimate members of the working class. This is something I've never understood about communists and socialists. You go to a farm and work it, and then tell me whether they're part of the working class or not. Indeed, sooner socialists developed a path-breaking farmers program that called for restoring land to working farmers. In addition, Socialist Party speakers relentlessly attacked tenancy, the crop lien system, and usury, the principal components of the agricultural crisis for small farmers. I would suggest that one of the reasons why you no longer have many farmers as socialists is because they basically quit caring about the farmer. But at any rate, as they made these arguments, Oklahoma socialists were careful to do so in terms that would make sense to their potential constituents. The party's goal of moving land from large owners into the hands of working farmers, they argued, was entirely consistent with the Republican ideals espoused by the nation's founding fathers. This is another difference. Instead of trashing the founding fathers, the Oklahoma socialists actually held them up as heroes and tried to do mental gymnastics of, yeah, the founding fathers were socialists just like us. In addition, party members worked hard to present their message in a cultural form that was familiar to most Oklahomans by using the language and imagery of fundamentalist Christianity. Another big difference. Instead of turning their back on God and saying there was no God, the Oklahoma socialists embraced God and said, hey, you know what? You don't have to give up your religion to join this party. In fact, Christ's message is very socialist. And there's actually good arguments to be made there. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying a good argument can be made. Socialists in the Sooner State held that their ideals were completely in keeping with the teachings of Jesus Christ, especially as expressed in the Sermon on the Mount. Building on this idea, some Oklahoma socialists argued that capitalism was an inherently un-Christian system. But socialism allowed citizens to live according to the biblical concept of cooperation. To them, socialism was a more moral Christian alternative than the current economic system. As a result, the message of socialist organizers and candidates was often couched in religious terms. So basically, at least in Oklahoma back then, you wouldn't have had somebody say, you've gone to the wrong rally. I couldn't help it. I had to. Many party members saw Jesus as the first socialist. So another difference, we're not epitomizing Karl Marx as much as Jesus Christ. You're seeing why it was so powerful out here. They considered it natural to make their case in fundamentalist Christian churches. In these ways, the Socialist Party of Oklahoma managed to present the message of socialism not as an alien doctrine, but as an alternative well within the boundaries of accepted American political discourse. Such a feat was unmatched elsewhere in the United States, and it helps explain the remarkable success of Oklahoma socialism. Thus, the party's concise indictment of some of the flaws of early 20th century America, coupled with its ability to present its Marxist message in terms that many Oklahomans found reasonable, made the Socialist Party of Oklahoma especially attractive to those at the bottom of society. And that's why we tax people at the bottom of society so much. As these recruits joined the party, they became part of a sophisticated organization consisting of more than 800 Socialist Party locals, with socialist precinct chairmen appointed to virtually every voting precinct in the state. Every summer, thousands of the faithful gathered at socialist encampments to be revitalized by several days of music, entertainment, and speakers. The tired blogger was right out. Dozens of county and local socialist newspapers served the movement's communication needs, as did a special Oklahoma edition of the National Socialist Weekly, The Appeal to Reason. Charismatic and effective leaders like H.M. Sinclair, Patrick S. Nagel, Oscar Ameringer, Stanley Clark, J.T. Cummey, H.H. Stallard, and Fred W. Holt skillfully articulated and executed the party's agenda. In addition to its stand on agricultural issues, the Oklahoma Socialist Party opposed the disenfranchisement of blacks. That was in stark contrast to a lot of Oklahomans back then, I got to tell you. I won't go any further into that, but that was a stark contrast. They supported women's suffrage. They worked closely with organized labor, condemned American involvement in the European War. The latter position proved to be problematic for the party, making it vulnerable to the repression and hysteria that accompanied the American declaration of war in 1917. State and national leaders responsible for war mobilization created a network of semi-official organization called Councils of Defense designed to promote patriotism and ensure support for the war effort. One of the primary tasks of these organizations was to identify citizens whose loyalty seemed suspect. Those identified as disloyal faced consequences ranging from ostracism to mob violence. As socialists spoke out against the war, they inevitably faced such consequences. Dozens of party members, many of them local leaders, were arrested during the war years, and the Socialist Party's electoral performance declined precipitously after 1916. In 1920, Eugene V. Debs, the socialist candidate for president, received only 5% of the vote in Oklahoma, down from the 15% the socialist presidential candidate had received 4 years earlier. Even more telling was the dismantling of the party organization as numerous locals were disbanded. By 1922, the once thriving Socialist Party of Oklahoma had virtually ceased to exist. Even so, the legacy of the Socialist Party of Oklahoma continued. Socialists played an important role in the success of Farmer Labor Reconstruction League in 1922. On a deeper level, Oklahoma socialists became important political actors during a crucial time in the state's history. Their diagnosis of society's shortcomings and many of their proposed remedies foreshadowed developments that during the Great Depression, scarcely a generation removed from the party's demise, would become all too clear. So it is forgotten by most, but there was actually a very strong socialist element at the very groundswell of Oklahoma political thought. And I would suggest that it's never really gone away. It's under the surface, it's not talked about, but I think it's there. Gorillas is thanking Suzanne for the links. She's got them covered. Jim's Landscape, that is. Everybody thanking each other. Love this community. Such wonderful people here. Comment Jim's Landscape. Well, crap. Back to my taxes. They're just numbers. Right on. Suzanne, yeah, Jim, I got to run now and get back to doing my taxes now. Wow. I hope that y'all end up okay. Suzanne is saying, have a great stream. Curtis, taxes are calling me. Peace out, everyone. So it's quite ironic. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? That people are having to do their taxes. Well, I'm streaming about taxes. Well, anyway, Suzanne, Jim's Landscape, I hope you have a wonderful evening and that your taxes are low. But somehow I doubt that they are. All right. I wanted to share one more thing, and then I will probably get off of this topic, at least for now. This is something I didn't know about. I found out about this during my researches the Smithsonian Magazine when the Socialist Revolution came to Oklahoma and was crushed. Inside the little known story of the Green Corn Rebellion, which I've heard of, but I'd forgotten all about this. I wasn't taught much about this, which blazed through the Sooner State a century ago. This photograph here, this type of socialism that took root in Oklahoma was unique. It allowed private farms and invoked evangelical Christianity. Ted Eberl, 68, a solid, rough-hewn man in canvas vest and camouflage cap, drives the gravel back roads of southeast Oklahoma in a pickup truck that smells of deer meat. Speaking in a twanging drawl, he tells story after story about the area. Forgive me, YouTube, but unalivings were a recurring theme as we rattle and jounce through low wooded hills, isolated farms, and thickets full of wild hogs. This article came out in 2019. It sounds like the rides I used to have with my dad. Seminole County was refuge for outlaws when it was Indian territory. There are still places you don't go unless you're invited, says a Burrell, a former county commissioner. Seminole County was also the center of the last armed and organized insurrection against the U.S. government. Boy, howdy. This dramatic, chaotic uprising of impoverished tenant farmers, mostly white, but including African Americans and Native Americans, made front page news across the nation in the summer of 1917, but is now almost forgotten, even where it took place. Most people around here have never heard of the Green Corn Rebellion, Burrell says, or it might ring a bell somewhere, but they can't tell you what happened. See, that's me. It rings a bell, but I couldn't really tell you a thing about it. Heck, I had two uncles that went to prison for it. I don't even know how they got mixed up in it, says a Burrell, not me. And I guess this is a Burrell. Yep, neat. A Burrell knows the geography of the rebellion, though, and he's taking me to key locations, starting with a rocky, brush-covered hill on the Little River. That's what they call Spears Mountain, he says. This is a picture of Ted Burrell from 6 years ago. He believes that his two rebel uncles were duped. They thought they could overthrow the government and avoid the draft, but it wasn't going to happen. In early August of 1917, several hundred rebels gathered here by the farm of John Spears, who had hoisted the red flag of socialist revolution. Socialists are about as common as Satanists in rural Oklahoma today and regarded in much the same light. But in the early 20th century, poor farmers flocked to the anti-capitalist creed. Most of the men on Spears Mountain and at other rebel gathering places were members of the Working Class Union, a secret socialist organization that vowed to destroy capitalism as well as resist the military draft for World War I. The rebels planned to rout the forces of law and order in Oklahoma and then march to Washington, D.C., where they would stop the war, overthrow the government, and implement a socialist commonwealth. The rebel leaders had assured their followers that 2 million working men would rise up with them, forming an unstoppable army. On the long march east, they would feed themselves with green, in other words, unripe corn, taken from the fields, hence the rebellion's name. That could not have been good for their digestive systems. A Burrell now drives to a rise overlooking the shallow, sandy South Canadian River. Uncle Dunny dynamited a railroad bridge right there, or it burned down. I've heard it both ways, he says. His name was Anthony Eberl. The other uncle was Albert Eberl. We called him Chuzzy. He went to prison because they hung someone using a rope that had his initials on it. At least that's the story I've always heard. Why would you put your initials on a rope? On Spears Mountain, the final suspenseful confrontation between the sheriff's posse and hundreds of tough-talking socialists ended in anticlimax with the rebels fleeing or surrendering. Spoiler alert, the socialists lost. Dunny and Chesney wouldn't talk to Ted about the rebellion after they came out of prison, and neither would Ted's father, but others said Dunny and Chesney were backed into it by violent threats from a few outside agitators. Ted wants to believe this, but he doubts it's true. They had razor-sharp knives. They were quick and mean, he says. Uncle Dunny killed a man in Arkansas and did 10 years in prison, came here when it was still outlaw territory. It's hard to imagine anyone forcing Dunny or Chesney into doing something he didn't want to do. And here's the bridge. Rebels dynamited the bridge over the South Canadian River near Saskatchewan to little effect. The fire was extinguished and traffic resumed late this afternoon, one report said. So at least there is a bridge there now. I assume it's not the original, but maybe, I don't know. It's extraordinary that this violent socialist rebellion against the U.S. government, the only one of its kind, has been largely erased from collective memory. Despite its failure, it wrecks long-standing arguments for American exceptionalism, as Alexis de Tocqueville called it. The notion that the United States is uniquely immune to radical, class-based uprisings. But what's most striking about the Green Corn Rebellion is the ambition of these half-starved backcountry farmers, the combination of boldness and delusion that propelled them to take on the government and the capitalist economic system. Armed with Winchesters, shotguns, and squirrel guns, riding on horses and mules, or walking on foot, they were confident of victory. It might surprise many who call themselves socialists today, including members of Congress, that the heartland of American socialism was once rural Oklahoma. In 1915, there were more registered Socialist Party members in Oklahoma than in New York, which had 7 times the population and a much stronger tradition of left-wing politics. Oklahoma socialists built a statewide movement, but won the most converts in the southeastern counties, where a small elite of predominantly white landowners had established a cotton fiefdom in the old Indian Territory. Southeastern Oklahoma, that would be what we now call Little Dixie. They rented out most of their land to tenant farmers, black and white, who migrated to Oklahoma from Texas, Arkansas, and the Deep South, dreaming of opportunity on a new frontier. Oh, that's a beautiful picture. A view of a farm through trees, taken from train tracks outside of Saskatchewan, Oklahoma. One reason that socialism thrived there was the appalling exploitation of these tenant farmers. I don't know if any of you have watched Grapes of Wrath, but yeah, life was pretty interesting back then. In addition to being rack rented with the lease payable in cotton and corn, they were charged outrageous rates of interest by banks and merchants for the credit they needed to put another crop in the ground. 20% interest was the baseline. 200% was not uncommon. And the highest compounded rates reached 2,000%. Please tell me, how is a poor man supposed to ever climb out paying rates like that? Buyers often offered rock bottom prices for cotton, and tenant farmers had no choice but to sell and mortgage the next year's crop to keep going. Adding to these burdens were the poor soil and periodic ravages of the pestilential boll weevil. No matter how hard they worked or how thrifty they were, tenant farmers were trapped in perpetual debt and abject poverty. Yeah, I might have become a socialist too. On the left is a fence line covered in thorns outside of Saskatchewan, Oklahoma, and the morning sun shining on a field in Seminole County, Oklahoma. I have no idea why one picture is black and white and the other isn't, but there it is. In 1907, the German-born socialist organizer and editor Oskar Ameringer met these ragged, emaciated men and women. He had been organizing dock workers in New Orleans when he agreed to come to Oklahoma and spread the budding socialist movement. What he found in the southeastern cotton counties was quote, humanity at its lowest possible level of degradation. And I'll believe that, unquote. Tenant farmers were living in crude shacks infested with bed bugs and other parasites. They were suffering the diseases of malnutrition and toiling in the fields for up to 18 hours a day. Though the American Socialist Party, following Marxist orthodoxy, disdained farmers as petty capitalists and argued that agriculture should be collectivized, Ameringer and other socialist leaders in Oklahoma viewed agricultural laborers as members of the working class. And I think that's been one of the biggest problems with communism from the beginning. We're not going to count someone who works his tail off as working class. Okay, whatever. Argued that anyone who works the soil has the right to own land. That was Marxist heresy, but it won over tens of thousands of debt-ridden small farmers. Socialist Party organizers who typically shun religion exploited the evangelical Christianity of the Oklahoma countryside. They portrayed Jesus Christ as a socialist hero, a carpenter who threw the money changers out of the temple and said it was easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. That's all in scripture, by the way. The gospel of socialism spread through Oklahoma at week-long summer camp meetings that attracted thousands and had the atmosphere of holiness revivals. Religious songs were given socialist lyrics. Onward Christian soldiers, for example, became onward friends of freedom and began toilers of the nation, thinkers of the time. Speakers told of the evils of capitalism, the great beast whose lair was Wall Street, and the imminent arrival of a paradise on earth called the Cooperative Commonwealth. Man, this is almost making me want to be a socialist, in which everyone would have enough to be comfortable and happy. Here at last, the tenant farmers' degradation was explained to them. The cause was the system, not their own shortcomings. Tenant farmers in Seminole County often failed, a 1922 account said, because rates on debt ran 18 to 60%. I got to tell you, if I was trying to grow a crop on interest rates that make credit card interest rates look good, I'm afraid I would have given it up. But then what do? You have no money. Where do you go? Where do you move? This unorthodox brand of socialism won support in Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Kansas, but it was strongest in Oklahoma. In 1914, the Sooner State elected 175 socialist candidates to county and township positions, including 6 to the state legislature, alarming the political establishment. Between 1915 and 1917, the recently founded working class union recruited thousands of angry, frustrated men in southeast Oklahoma, perhaps as many as 20,000. Their activities ranged from legal strikes, boycotts and lawsuits, to night riding. Different kind of night riding, I'm sorry. Bank robberies, barn burning, and dynamiting farm equipment. Nothing helped the WCU more than President Woodrow Wilson's decision in April 1917 to engage the United States in World War I. It meant that young men would be fighting and dying in Europe, not helping their families raise a crop. Under the charismatic leadership of H. Rude Munson, the wayward son of a prosperous Kansas pharmacist, carry on my wayward son, and his mesmerizing Lieutenant Homer Spence, no relation to Mike Pence, the WCU grew stronger by promising to shelter draft dodgers. Oklahoma farmers and socialists called Woodrow Wilson Big Slick, which I kind of think of him that way too myself anymore, and denounced the Allied cause as a rich man's war, poor man's fight, which, I kind of tend to agree with that now that I've studied history more. No one knows more about the Green Corn Rebellion than Nigel Sellers. Oh, you know, my name is Nigel, and I like to do drawings. Anyway, he's a historian at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, who discovered an archival gold mine in the old German files of the Bureau of Investigation. Holy cow! The predecessor of the FBI. The files preserved on microfilm at the National Archives contain the Bureau's records of anti-war activities from 1915 to 1920. I found affidavits, federal agents' reports, and interviews with the participants, Sellers told me via email. He suggested that I, the author of this article, not me. Anyway, he should take a look for himself. Little River passes through Seminole County, Oklahoma. It was at the National Archives branch in College Park, Maryland, that the author, Trevor Paulhouse is the cameraman. The author is Richard Grant. Don't call him Dick Grant. He doesn't like that. I hope YouTube doesn't get upset with me for saying that. Anyway, this is where Mr. Grant learned the truth about Ted Eberle's mysterious uncles Anthony and Albert Eberle. Far from being backed into it, they were among the leaders of the local WCU and the draft resistance. That's why Uncle Chezzy went to prison. There are no records of anyone being hanged during the rebellion. The Eberle brothers had dynamite for blowing up railroad bridges and strychnine to poison the food and water that rebel wives would offer to investigating lawmen. They also threatened people into joining the rebellion. Uncle Dunny, in a moment that captured the rebellion's atavistic frontier style, pointed 2 Winchester rifles at a young wavering recruit and said, blank you, get on that horse and come along. The rolls of microfilm reveal that the WCU, despite its vows of secrecy, its murder policies for snitches, and a system of secret passwords, was thoroughly penetrated by undercover federal agents and informants. One agent drank and played cards for 10 hours with WCU leaders at a saloon called Mother McKeever's in Dewar, Oklahoma, as they plotted to dynamite the gas lines to the smelters at a local mine. The sabotage, they said, would launch a campaign of dirty work so devastating that the big bones, or rich capitalists, would hide in their cellars when they saw the sign of the WCU. It wasn't all barroom talk. Soon afterward, explosions destroyed gas lines and a waterworks near Dewar, and WCU members were arrested for the crimes. On May 25, Special Agent M.L. Cutler reported that WCU members in Hughes County, Oklahoma, were recruiting men in large numbers and buying guns and ammunition with the intention of fighting conscription. In Seminole County, after considerable questioning, a Native American WCU member named Auntie Tiger revealed plans to murder local draft officers. Homer Spence was in Seminole County on June 8 and spoke to the friendship local of the WCU. If they allowed themselves to be examined by draft officers, he said, they would never get to see Sally and baby no more. Ooh. He laid out some tactics for the first phase of the rebellion: poison the wells, fight from the underbrush, seize weapons from Uncle Sam's dead soldiers, blow up buildings belonging to the Slicks, destroy the railroads, loot everything possible, carry it home in wagons and hide it, then be ready to march to Washington. Spence warned members that he was a subcat and asked if they knew what that meant. They said no. He said it was a death angel with a blindfold on that would appear to them in sleep. According to the affidavit of W.H. Hubler, that nearly scared the boys to death. They didn't know what to do. The friendship local was led by Jim Danley, a wiry 35-year-old with a sandy complexion, and by the Eberle brothers. Danley was overflowing with revolutionary fervor. He told the boys that the uprising wouldn't just be nationwide but global, and they would whip the capitalist class once and for all. Meanwhile, the Burrell brothers were recruiting their relatives to the WCU, urging people not to register for the draft, and stashing ammunition, strychnine, and dynamite. Good looking guy. Alonzo Lonnie Spears, son of John Meredith Spears, was among the 28 insurgents who served time at Leavenworth Federal Prison in Kansas. On the night of August the 2nd, the Friendship Local and Francis Local met on a sandbar in the South Canadian River. The meeting was interrupted when Captain Bill Benfield, head of the Lone Dove Local, rode up on a mule. He was, according to the historian James R. Green's account in Grassroots Socialism, wearing a red sash with a saber at his waist. He announced that some of his members had ambushed and killed Sheriff Frank Grawl and his deputy Will Cross. So they shot the sheriff and the deputy, and the rebellion was now underway. In fact, Grawl was only grazed, and Cross survived his neck wound. So they shot the sheriff, but they only wounded the deputy. Some of the men on the sandbar threw their hats in the air and hurrahed. Others got scared and wanted to leave, but Jim Danley grabbed his shotgun. The Burrell brothers leveled their Winchesters, and Beanfield drew his gun. The first blankety blank that starts to leave here, Danley reportedly said, we'll leave him right here. Then they dispersed in groups and started carrying out their plans. They cut telephone and telegraph lines and set fire to railroad bridges and trestles. One group attempted but failed to dynamite an oil pipeline. On the morning of August 3, they mustered on Spears Mountain, also known as Spears Ridge, some 400 strong. They roasted a large quantity of corn and a stolen heifer. Then they waited for Uncle Sam's troops to come or signal to begin marching to Washington. News of the rebellion had spread rapidly, carried in part by fleeing conscripts, and nearby towns were in a panic. Reign of terror and whole region aflame, one newspaper proclaimed. White citizens were particularly alarmed to learn. I don't mean to be racist here. This is just what happened at the time and what people were like back then. But white citizens were particularly alarmed to learn that blacks and Indians were among the rebels. In the town of Kanawha, women spent the night hiding in a cornfield while men lay on the roofs of store buildings with rifles. Sheriffs wasted no time. Within 24 hours, they had 1,000 armed men guarding the towns or hunting the rebels. On Spears Mountain, around 3 p.m., the rebels saw a posse coming toward them. This should be a movie, you know it? Benfield counted 30 or 40 men in the distance and declared that killing them all would be light work. As the posse drew closer, however, courage deserted the rebel leaders. At first, Danley and Benfield gave orders to fight like heck. But before a single gun was fired, they gave orders to run like heck, according to the affidavit of Lee Adams, a 22-year-old in the Friendship Local. The vast majority of the rebels fled through the hills for home or hid out in the river bottoms. One group remained to put up a fight, but expecting federal troops, they saw instead the familiar faces of their neighbors in the posse. As Walter Strong later explained, we couldn't shoot them down in cold blood. That's the way we felt about the Germans, too. We didn't have no quarrel with them at all. So they threw their guns down and surrendered. The difference between why the Russian Communist Party fell and the Chinese Communist Party survived Tiananmen Square. One brought in local boys who were not willing to shoot their fathers and sons and mothers and daughters. The Chinese brought in people from the outlying provinces who were quite happy to end the revolution. Out of all the insurrections in American history, very few were as ambitious as the Green Corn Rebellion, and it must be judged as a disastrous failure. The authorities used the rebellion as a pretext to arrest innocent socialists all over Oklahoma. sounds about right, and permanently destroy the socialist movement in the state by equating it with treason and violent anarchy. State and local governments established an intensely repressive, hyper-patriotic regime in which citizens were jailed for failing to buy war bonds and lynched and murdered for voicing anti-war sentiments. Nigel Sellers sums up the rebellion as, quote, the only explicitly socialist insurrection in American history and the only one that mirrors the other revolutions in 1917, unquote. As Oklahoma newspapers and politicians proudly declared, Marxist revolution might have triumphed in Russia that year, but it got nowhere in the Sooner State. Victor Walker, 75 at the time this article was written, was a genial retired sales executive in a small shrinking town of Kanawha. His grandfather, William Wallace Walker, was one of the rebellion's leaders. The evidence was a document unearthed by a local journalist at the Oklahoma Historical Society. It was never talked about in my family, Victor says. My sister knew that Grandpa had gone to prison, but she thought he had stolen a horse. I had to tell her no. He tried to overthrow the U.S. government. She said, "What?" She had never heard of the Green Corn Rebellion. On the left is an old street sign standing in a field. And then over here, sun sets over trees and grassland in I can't pronounce anything, Saskatchewan, Oklahoma. Victor, the youngest child, found out about the rebellion from his father, Rex, who finally broke his silence toward the end of his life and told a few stories about the rebellion's aftermath. Posses and lawmen were scouring the countryside in the biggest manhunt in Oklahoma history. 3 rebels were killed in shootouts, and an innocent schoolteacher was gunned down while attempting to drive through a roadblock. William Wallace Walker. Interesting name. Was still hiding out, and young Rex was delivering his meals. One day, lawmen came to the house and wrapped a long chain around my dad's neck, says Victor. He was 15 or 16, just a boy. They told him, "We're going to hang you from a tree unless you tell us where that blankety blank is hiding." My dad didn't tell them a blank thing, which was typical of him and his brothers. Grandpa raised 5 or 6 of the meanest boys that ever walked this country. I know my dad's generation and his father's generation, being mean was counted as a virtue. On several occasions, Rex woke up in the middle of the night to find lawmen in the house holding kerosene lanterns and searching through the one room in which the family slept to see if the fugitive had sneaked home. Eventually, William Wallace Walker turned himself in. He served a year and a day in the federal penitentiary at Fort Leavenworth. He lived 10 more years after that, but he was never the same, said Victor. He came out broke, mentally and physically, and lost his farm while he was in prison. In the course of the manhunt, law enforcement authorities arrested 458 men, including many Socialist Party members who had no connection to the rebellion. At least 16 wanted men were never captured, including one of the WCU members who'd shot the sheriff and his deputy near Lone Dove. Some newspapers and politicians called for the arrested men to be lynched, and initially the U.S. prosecutors said their treason warranted the death penalty, but 2/3 of them were released for lack of evidence, and the authorities accepted that most of the rebels had been duped or coerced into taking part. 86 men, all of whom pleaded guilty, were sentenced to prison terms of 1 to 10 years. Rube Munson and Spence got the longest terms and served under tough conditions in Fort Leavenworth. Here we have wildflowers growing in a field in Seminole County. When the former Green Corn rebels were released, many had to move away because landlords refused to rent to them. The rest kept their heads down and their mouths shut. Captain Bill Beanfield was so tormented with regret and remorse over the rebellion that he unalived himself. Ted Burrell's Uncle Dunny, if anyone asked, said he would gladly fight for Uncle Sam if given another chance. The Oklahoma Socialist Party disbanded in 1918. In a manicured neighborhood in the Oklahoma City suburb lives a courtly cigarette-smoking octogenarian named Paul Gaines. His family history contains a bitter footnote to the Green Corn Rebellion. On the first day of 1920, nearly a year and a half after the rebellion folded, his grandfather, Tom Ragland, who had served on the county draft board, was riding through Seminole County. 5 men lurking by a culvert blasted him off his horse with shotguns. His body was found with a typewritten note pinned to his chest saying, "Never again would he send men to war." This is the photo of Paul Gaines in Edmond. He recalls the murder of his grandfather, Tom Ragland. They found out when his horse came home without him. That was a faithful horse. His name was Button. My grandmother put up a grave marker where his body was found, but the family was worried that it might get stolen or vandalized. So I have it here now, says Gaines. Be happy to show it to you. He leads me across the back lawn to a storage shed, unlocks the padlock, pulls back the door, and points to a slab of gray stone inscribed with these words, Tom Ragland, killed here January 1st, 1920. Below that, the stone is damaged, but you can still see most of the ominous message that Ragland's wife put there for his murderers. Prepare to meet your God. Here's the photo of that tombstone. The men who killed Tom Ragland, a member of the local draft board, were never brought to justice. Rebels had opposed what they called a rich man's war, but a poor man's fight. I think it's fair to say that my grandfather was the last casualty of the Green Corn Rebellion, said Gaines, closing up his shed, and his killers got away with it. The case was never solved. So there you have it, the history of socialism in Oklahoma, and I still believe that there is at least a shadow of that spirit behind why our taxes are so high. Gorilla Censored Thoughts, you're breaking the law, you're teaching DEI. Darkwoods presents. Hey everybody, hopefully I'm not too late. Yeah, you're here for the very ending. Interesting. The Daily Oklahoman, OKC hands-off protest draws large crowd opposing Trump. Очень интересно. And that's the link to Darkwood's coverage of San Jose's hands-off protest that happened yesterday. I did think that was very interesting. I guess I'll take a little bit of time and read the article before I call it a stream, if it will let me through the paywall. Often it doesn't. Okay, it looks like it may. It looks like it may. I have to hurry before it realizes that I don't subscribe. All right. Let's see what the Oklahoman has to say about large Oklahoma City crowd gathers for hands-off protest to oppose Trump and Musk policies. Demonstrators also expressed concerns about attacks on the Constitution, racism, and the treatment of federal workers and agencies. More than 1,000 people gathered in Oklahoma City for the hands-off demonstration, joining nationwide protests against the Trump administration. A woman wiped a tear from her eye as she stood among the large crowd that gathered for the hands-off administration on Saturday outside Oklahoma City Hall. Cassie Grimm said showing up for the protest was her way of standing up for her friends and people she didn't know, whose rights have been trampled upon by the federal and state governments. If I could pick one issue for me personally, it is standing up for LGBTQIA plus rights, which has always been a struggle in Oklahoma, but it's getting worse, Grimm said. They deserve to be themselves, and I really want the government to know that. Here we have a picture. That is quite a lot of people. A crowd gathers on April 5 during a hands-off protest in Oklahoma City as part of a nationwide demonstration against the Trump administration. Grimm was among the more than 1,000 people who participated in the Oklahoma City demonstration in conjunction with nationwide hands-off protests held in other cities across the country. Tulsans were expected to hold a similar demonstration Saturday at Dreamkeepers Park. Leaders with Indivisible Oklahoma and 50501 Oklahoma said their groups organized the Oklahoma City demonstration to encourage residents to show the Trump administration, billionaire Elon Musk, and Oklahoma's congressional leaders that they oppose their policies, including potential efforts to cut programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Several speakers also told the crowd to let Governor Kevin Stitt, Oklahoma School Superintendent Ryan Walters, and Oklahoma legislators that they too were taking actions that hurt Oklahomans. Here we see people protesting during a hands-off protest outside City Hall in Oklahoma City. Today, we are here to say hands off our government, hands off our health care, Cindy Alexander, an organizer with Indivisible Oklahoma, said. We're here in defiance of the Trump-Musk billionaire takeover. Beto Divino Rivas implored the crowd not to give in to hate as they continue to voice opposition against President Donald Trump, his administration and allies, who have said their actions are motivated by faith. Trump used this God of love as a way to justify their tactics and actions, which I find despicable, he said. Another speaker, Diana Mitchell, said it was up to Americans to show the Trump administration that democracy is important to them. More than 1,000 people protest Saturday in Oklahoma City. Thousands gathered yesterday at rallies across the country, including Oklahoma City, to voice concerns over President Donald Trump's actions since taking office. I'm here today because this is what democracy looks like, and I believe our seats at the table are not for sale. If you watched my stream yesterday, you know that our seats actually are for sale. They shouldn't be, but they are. She said as she looked out into the crowd. Right now, as we stand here today, we are telling the Trump administration that we are taking our power back. We're telling MAGA that we will not be erased. Their hate is loud. Resistance is louder. I love being told how I feel by someone who doesn't even know me. The crowd chanted in unison several times during the demonstration. Hands off our democracy! Hands off our Constitution! They shouted. Here's more America has no king, etc., etc. People protest April 5 during a hands-off protest. Several Oklahomans said they participated in the protest for specific reasons. I'm here because of the frontal assault on our Constitution and in opposition to the degradation of our society, and to role model for my daughter, Nash Carey of Edmond said. Alice Parker of Oklahoma City said she was opposing the shutting down of various aid programs and the firing of federal workers. A flag waves as people hold signs during a hands-off protest April 5 outside City Hall in Oklahoma City. I came to protest the shutting down of USAID, she said. I'm here for all the agencies that have been closed that did good work, and now they can't. Kim Burns and her husband each held signs as they listened to the speakers. Resist tyranny, no kings. People listened to speakers during hands-off protest outside City Hall in Oklahoma City. We are an interracial couple and we are scared about racism, Kim Burns said. Like the couple, most people in the crowd held homemade signage that told stories. Make Orwell fiction again. Oh, I would love that, but anyway, I won't comment. Hate will not make us great. Marriage equality and health care for all. Can't kidnap us all. Country over party. No tax cut extension. No one is illegal on stolen land. Interesting. Resist tyranny. Abolish executions. Social Security is not an entitlement. That's interesting. More for billionaires, less for us. Hands off the VA. And America has no king. Showed the gamut of issues that brought the crowd to the steps of City Hall on the cold Saturday afternoon. It's a pretty good article. And again, because of the nature of this podcast, I'm not going to make any comment, but I am very glad, Darkwoods, that you shared that. And y'all take a look at his presentation of the protest in his neck of the woods. Darkwoods present. It wasn't very interesting, but that's not the point. No, I know. I get it. I do get it. Gorillas, censored thoughts. You screwed up the order of the letters. Now the Rainbow Mafia will come after you. Yeah, okay. Darkwoods presents. When the bleep did Trump say it was a matter of his faith? I don't know. If anyone wants to point it out, I'll be happy to share it. But I have not heard him say anything about that either. But, facts only matter when it's liberals saying things. Darkwoods presents. They were totally trolled by Trump saying that King statement. Emotional damage. Alrighty. Darkwoods present. I'm trying not to speak to them because they might lead to violence from them. Yeah. Stay safe. There's nothing about this protest that's worth your life. You can do more good if you're still breathing. I am going to call it a stream. A special one because I wanted to share all this history, and I hope you found it entertaining and maybe somewhat informative. I bet you didn't know that Oklahoma is so full of rebels. Fortunately, we've mostly been beaten down. This guy owes me money. Thank you very much, Charlotte Nightstar the Werewolf. I hope you are having a wonderful stream. Thank you for your support and for your thoughtful comments. I hope you are doing well. Look at this ugly guy. Man, how does he ever get dates? I don't get it. John Ponderera, thank you very much for the links, for the prayers. Yes, I'll leave it at that. And thank you for the kind comments and for letting me know that the green machine is evidently working. I guess. I hope. Accounting sheet. Or maybe I should say, bah. Thank you very much for your support and your kind comments. I know you're going through a trial of your own. I hope that you are doing well. Prayers are going up for you, good sir. Gorilla Censored Thoughts. Hail and well met. Thank you very much for the support, the kindness, the mentorship, and the intro. Please check out his content. It is pretty cool with watch parties and commentaries. And the cigar lounge is a lot of fun. Suzanne, thank you. I mistook your yellow shirt for a Star Trek shirt. I don't know what I'm thinking. But that's okay. I hope you and Canada are going well, and good luck with your taxes. Connie Cleary, thank you very much for your support, for sharing the movies in your community and the radio plays. I hope the birds and critters are doing well. If Cassie would wake up, I'd show her to y'all, but she's pretty hard asleep. Jim's Landscape. Check out this gentleman's Star Trek fan films. And thank you for your kind comments and for the information about Canada. I hope that your taxes go well, and I hope that Canada finds its way to better times. Alrighty. John says it still looks good over there on Rumble. And Gorilla says, thank you and no problem. Well, I haven't yet developed a cool sign-off. I guess I'll just quote Walter Cronkite somewhat. That's the way it was with the socialist revolution in Oklahoma. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, or at least doesn't happen that way again. Before I go, let's take a look at the poll. 50% of you say that Oklahoma does a terrible job of marketing itself, and that's why it doesn't get good businesses. 30% of you say that the taxes here are too high. 10% say too much poverty. 10% say Oklahoma is too red and corporations are blue. So I think that probably there's a little bit of truth to all of it, but the fact that we are crappy at marketing ourselves, I think that's totally true. Ooh, a 30-second thank you song. That would be cool. Let me know when you would like to do that. I'm about to take off, but I will be back in probably 45 minutes. But yeah, I would love to do that. That would be great. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. And, if you've got to join a revolution, just don't join one like the one I just read about.